Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ditch the Store. Episode 160 today, and CJ on my own, the handy helper, is at work. I'm going to batch record a few today, so he won't be here for the next couple of ones, even though some of these are probably right up his alley. Today we are talking about composting. Now, I know a lot of people get a bit like, oh God, do we really have to compost? We can just go to Bunnings and buy some bags of soil mix and things like that. But honestly, composting, there's so many good reasons why you should be composting, and it's not that hard. I reckon people make it harder than it needs to be. They get all complicated with it. And honestly, I've probably done it the really lazy person's way, and it's working a treat. So if you've been putting it off because you think it's a bit complex, or maybe you think that's going to smell, and it shouldn't smell. Compost should smell like earth, not like anything like rotting food. Or you think you need a fancy setup. We're going to go through today why you don't need those things. I've got notes here, and I was just going through my notes going, that doesn't make any sense. It does sound complicated when you get into the composting, like what you need to be doing. But until you realise that it's just rotting stuff in a controlled way, that's probably the easiest way to look at it. That's literally the whole thing, is you are just breaking down organic matter to make it turn back into soil, which, you know, it's a lot cheaper to do it from your own home than to go and buy it in bags or have loads of it shipped in. Now, I know that there are places that certainly there's a nearby place to us called Lantasia, and they do bulk, like truckloads of compost. Now, if you were somebody who was trying to actively do regenerative agriculture on your farm, and you had soil that the topsoil had completely vanished from, then of course that is an excellent way to go, to buy in compost that you know has certain properties in it, and you're going to be able to spread that and use that to regenerate topsoil and get plants growing again. But for the average person in their backyard, or urban backyard, or small homestead acreage, doing your own composting is going to be so much easier and cheaper. Before we get started, I wanted to do a little shout out to Lauren, who sent me some videos, and that she sent me the videos a couple of weeks ago. But in all honesty, my Facebook and Meta account does not work great all the time. I'm definitely not technologically advanced when it comes to that kind of shit. But Lauren sent me some videos of her setup that she has up in Brisbane. She's got backyard chickens, and the girls are gorgeous. And I saw your post that you now have eggs. Congratulations, they are laying. That's awesome news. The handy helper, I showed him the video. She sent me a lovely video about how she'd set up a rainwater tank next to her chook run, and had the water coming off the roof into a drum, and that drum fed the drip feeders going into the chicken's yard, but it even had an overflow pipe so that you wouldn't end up with a boggy pit at the bottom of the barrel underneath where the water was collecting. We loved it. We could not believe how much work you've put in. You are one clever lady, and congratulations on getting some eggs finally, because that's always the waiting game. You kind of get your chickens, and then you sit there and go, when are they going to start laying eggs? So that being said, thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate it. Now, if anybody wants to send me videos on like DM me, please do, because honestly, like I said, I sent a message back to Lauren. When you're podcasting, you never know if you're talking to somebody and they're hearing you. And so when I get messages, and I don't get a lot, when I get messages, I get very excited, because it means that somebody out there is actually taking on board what we're discussing, which is great. And, you know, I'm not the expert in everything. I'm probably just, you know, a couple of years ahead of some people. But I love seeing other people's setups because it just makes it, the handy helper sat there and looked and went, oh my God, that's a really good setup with that rainwater. So send me your DMs, send me your videos. I'd love to see them. And thank you, Lauren, for sending them. Okay, so why does compost matter? Why should you even bother with compost? You can go to Bunnings and you can buy bags of potting mix, topsoil, things like that there. And I get that most people are busy and they think that's just another job to add in the mix. And I know sometimes I do say when you first start out homesteading, don't try and do everything at once. When you try and do everything at once, you tend to get burnt out. But honestly, this one is not a big one to do, and it really shouldn't take much time. But what you need to know about composting is why to do it. And the fact that once it's set up, it basically runs itself. You really don't, it's not a huge maintenance job, and the payoff for it is genuinely worth it. Now, before I go into the 3 reasons, before I go into the 3 reasons, I had a conversation with a farmer that lives down the road a couple of months back now, and we were talking about soil health. And something that he said to me, which I didn't realise because we don't till, we don't drop seeds, we don't do cropping or anything like that here. We are only a livestock farm. So we don't do any of those things where you are breaking up the soil and adding things to the soil. And what he said to me was how frustrated he was that he's on this never-ending merry-go-round of having to, because he's trying to grow crops in the soil, he's constantly having to put artificial fertilizers in because the crops and the soil are so depleted at this point that they're just not coping. And so he gets given pesticides from the big seed companies and with these seeds, and then he has to buy artificial and synthetic fertilizers to try and get the soil health back to scratch so that he can then grow again in that soil. And he said it's like a treadmill. You can't get off it once you're on it. So I think probably the best thing to do is not get on that treadmill, especially if you're only, having a veggie garden and you're not doing it at a commercial level. For him, I get that every kilo of grain counts. And so he has to keep going on that treadmill now. But for those of us that are only doing it for our own personal use, why would you want to add synthetic fertilizers to ground when you can add organic fertilizer to ground? It just doesn't make any sense at all. So the 3 big reasons why I compost. 1 is it saves money. The stuff that you would be putting in the bin, and for the first 3 years that we lived here, we didn't have a bin service at all. We do have a bin service now, but we try not to put organic matter in the bin. We have a bucket next to the sink, and anything organic, and I mean anything organic. I know people say, don't put meat into your compost. Guess what? We bury dead chooks in our compost. We put meat in our compost. We put everything in. If it's organic, if it is not man-made, it goes into our compost. It's controversial, and I know people will go, oh my God, no, I'm never putting meat in there. It'll stink. If you bury it down deep enough under the other compost, under what you've got there, it's not going to stink. We bury our chooks in there at the back of our compost, and by the time we turn it over and get to where they were, they are completely disintegrated. And why would we dig a hole and bury them when they pass away when we can put them in the compost and turn them back over into the garden? It just makes more sense to me. But I don't want to go to the garden centres or Bunnings or your Tractor Supply store and buy bags of potting mix. To me, it's like throwing money away. And look, some of it is cheap and some of it's cheap and nasty. And that's why it's cheap. So if I can just put compost, if I can get soil out of my compost pile and top dress my garden beds with that, I would much rather do it that way than go to a store and buy a bag of it. The second reason is that it builds up your soil. And there's a real difference between feeding your plants and feeding your soil. Soil is alive and it's got, and I always get it wrong, but it's the microorganisms that are in soil. They have a life cycle, and their life cycle promotes soil health. if you have healthy soil that you are putting good organic matter into, those microorganisms will grow and they will do their job in the soil, exactly what they're designed to do. So it creates healthy soil, and healthy soil creates a better structural soil, which means that when you do plant your plants in there, the roots going into the soil will settle better. They'll be able to pick up more nutrients out of the soil, and you'll have an all-round better plant. And you don't have to fertilise as much. If the plants are growing in really good soil, then fertiliser is not necessarily needed. I mean, I always have sea salt, which is just a seaweed liquid fertiliser mix, which is organic. I always have that on hand. But there's times when I've been growing things where I've never had to use it because the soil is so healthy that we've got in there. And I just realised I've got a plant in my bedroom that we didn't use potting mix for. We used our compost that we had broken down ourselves. I think they call it a money plant, or no, is it a money plant or it's a really common indoor plant. I'll have to put a photo up and somebody can tell me, because I have no idea if it's not a vegetable or a fruit. I have no idea what it is. But it's growing great guns in my bedroom, and I've never fertilised it. It's just growing in our compost and that's it. But the soil, when the soil's healthy, you end up with better quality soil, so better, the plants are growing better because they're getting better nutrients out of it. The water and drainage rate on good soil is so much easier to manage, because, there's not many plants that want waterlogged soil, and there's not many plants that want an arid, dry soil either. Most want that beautiful balance in between, where it's quite dark, rich soil that's got a good amount of moisture in it. There's that word, moist. There's always somebody that hates it, so I'm putting it out there every time. Most plants want the soil to be able to hold enough moisture so that they're not drying out, but not so much moisture that they're sitting in damp areas. Dampness is not good for most plants' roots. It's, like that overly damp, just moist. There we go, that word again. I said it the other day at work, and one of the girls at work freaked out. I hate that word. Anyway, so basically, if your soil health is great, then everything in your garden is going to reflect that. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is it reduces waste. Now, it doesn't technically reduce waste. The waste is still there, but it reduces the waste that you're putting into a bin to go to a commercial dump. We try to, even though we have a bin down the front now, it gets emptied once a month rather. So our bin service is only once a month, not once a week like most places in Australia. And we try to put the minimal amount in there. We're actually going through at the moment and clearing and decluttering our shipping container and our shed, because we live in a tiny house, and a lot of our stuff when we moved here 6-7 years ago got put in the shed and the shipping container. And we're just kind of going through a process now that we have a bin of going, let's declutter. Let's get rid of some of this shit that we don't need. If it's been sitting in the shed for 3 years, or the shipping container for 3 years, and I haven't used it, chances are I'm not going to use it. So by having a compost system, you are stopping putting anything organic in your garbage bin that's going out to waste. And honestly, I mean, I can't think of anything better than that. Even though, by some people's standards, I would be considered a climate change denier, because I question a lot of what we are told in mainstream media. One thing I am not is somebody who likes polluting our environment. And I think the least amount of stuff that you can have going to landfill, the better. So anything that can be recycled or broken down, take that opportunity and run with it. You're improving your immediate environment by doing that. So kitchen scraps, lawn cuttings, which we don't have a lot of lawn cuttings. The handy helper mows our house block, just so that we can see if there's snakes in there or anything like that. But for the most part, grass on our place gets eaten by animals. But garden clippings, cardboard, cardboard or paper. We don't put a lot of cardboard or paper into our compost, and the reason for that is because we have a fireplace, And so we generally put most of our cardboard into a pile next to the fireplace. And during the winter months, the cardboard and paper is used to help light the fire. But the rest of everything else, anything else organic in the house goes into compost. And what we're trying to do is kind of make a closed loop on the homestead where things that are grown here, that organic matter that's been developed here is going back to the soil here. That would be the end goal eventually. And I think it's a pretty good goal to aim for. Like, even if you're in an urban block and you're bringing stuff in from the supermarket, if you can, carrot tops and, ends of beans and lettuce leaves that are a bit scrappy on the outside, the stubby bit of the end of the cabbage, if you can chuck that into your compost and start breaking it down, you're going to be 10 steps ahead of everybody else when it comes to soil. So, section 2. The only thing you really need to understand, it's not the only thing, but this is the bit that seems to confuse people. And certainly when I first started doing composting, I kind of didn't really understand. I was reading about it and going, oh my God, that just sounds too complicated, getting these ratios right and all this kind of thing. But here we go. You start reading and it goes, you'll get something that says composting ratios of carbon to nitrogen ratios, which freaks most people out, because if you don't have a science background, you go, I don't know what that is and I don't know what the balance should be. Hot composting versus cold composting. Again, people go, what's the difference? Like, what's better? What's going to work? What should I do? Is hot going to catch on fire? And I've had people say that to me. Hot composting, aren't you worried about it, sparking up? No, I'm not. And then they get through all that and they go, no, I'm not going to compost because it's just too hard, because that just sounds too complicated. So the one thing you really need to think about is greens versus browns. That's all you need to think about. So what are greens? Greens are your wet, nitrogen-rich stuff. So think of the greens as the nitrogen ratio. So kitchen scraps, vegetable peels, fruit scraps, coffee grounds. We put coffee grounds, well, we don't actually. We should probably be putting coffee grounds in there, but I stopped doing it ages ago. We had so much going in there. But tea bags, and honestly, just pull a little bit of paper off the end. You can chuck the paper in there, but the string and the paper bag that the tea bags are in, that'll compost down as well. Fresh grass clippings, so obviously green grass clippings. Fresh manure. That's one thing we have in abundance here, animal manure. Anything wet or greenish is what you would classify as your green stuff. And that's your nitrogen stuff. Now, your browns, sounds terrible. It sounds like I'm talking about something else. Your browns are your dry carbon-rich stuff. So they're things like cardboard or paper. I know for a time I was getting the shredded paper from work and mixing it in because we had too much green stuff, and you kind of want to keep the balance nice. So, even though it's treated paper, I didn't care. It still broke down. Like, yeah, it's got dyes in it. By the time it breaks down enough to go into my garden, there's probably not a lot of that stuff left in it. Dry leaves, straw, wood chips. So when we clean out the chicken yards, we can scrape up the wood shavings that we use in their nesting boxes and put that in. Anything dry or brownish. So anything that is going to take some of the moisture out. And when it mixes in, it'll even up the moisture balance. You want a rough balance of the two. And some people say 2 browns to 1 green so that it doesn't get too damp and moist in there. But honestly, even if you did half and half, you'd still be, miles ahead of anybody else. But if it looks like it's getting too damp and too boggy in there, that's when you want to try and get some dry brown stuff in there. And that's, you can put, just if you've got an old cardboard box, cut it up a bit. Doesn't have to cut it up fancy, just rip it into pieces and chuck it in there because it'll start to absorb some of that moisture. Don't stress about getting it perfect, because if you put off doing it because you're trying to make it perfect, what's the saying? Better done than none. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect, so long as you have a crack at it. And a rough balance is really all you need to get started. On our farm, we tend to put, we've got chicken scraps that we give to the chickens, but we also have, sometimes we have too much. If I've done a big cook up and things like that, we have more than what the chickens are ever going to use, and I will chuck that in there. And that is your greens. You can also chuck eggshells in there too. Crush them up, chuck them in there. It's a calcium dump. It's really good. I've seen people recently sterilising eggshells and blending them up and using them as powder in their smoothies. Not sure that I'm ready to go to that next level, but that's how they get their calcium. Good on them. But dry straw or dry sawdust from chicken coops is also really good to add in there. And like I said, the cardboard boxes, if nothing else, just rip it into a few pieces and chuck it in there. It will break down. Believe it or not, it'll break down. The trick is to turn it over pretty regularly. Now, one thing that I did want to add was, if you've got chickens and they free range, or you've got a pen that you can kind of place around your compost area, a really good way to do it is to chuck your chickens in there and let them turn it over. They will scratch through, they will eat anything that's left. So if they see bits of peelings or anything like that, they will eat them. They'll poop where they're standing. So that chicken poo is going straight back in. So that's a really good nitrous kind of filler for your compost. And that will go back into your compost without you having to carry it from the chook yard over to the compost heap. So that's a really good way of getting them to turn it over as well. Now, that would only work in a small one. We go out there with a big pitchfork and turn ours over with a pitchfork. We joke about one day having a little dingo, little backhoe driver, little flipper that we can go out there and really turn it. But for now, a pitchfork works fine for us to break it up and turn it over. Okay, so section 3 I'm up to. 3 simple ways to start. So a lot of people do put off starting because they think they need some kind of special equipment. And I know when you go into Bunnings, you go down to where they have the compost bins and things like that, and they'll have these big tumblers that you can buy, and the dual compartment composters, and these tubs that you can sit in your yard. And I've even seen a composter for dog poop, where obviously you're not going to put the dog poop on your veggie garden, or you could, I guess, once it's broken down enough. But you bury it into the ground, and when you clean up the dog poop out of your yard, you lift the lid, put the dog poop in there. And the idea is that it breaks down because it's slightly buried in the ground. By the time it breaks down into the ground, it's never full. It never gets full because it breaks down and keeps going into the soil, feeding into the soil. Couple of options that I want you to think about, and I'll actually I had them written down in reverse order, so I'll go the other way because I want to go the most expensive to the least expensive. And so the most expensive would be one of those tumblers. Now, the tumblers, I think I had a look at the price. I haven't got it written here, but they're a couple of $100. And years ago, I did buy one. When we lived at Gunning, I bought one. I think I got it a bit cheaper than that, but it was a double-barrelled one that used to roll over. So you'd start on one side, and get it flipping over. And then once that started to break down, you would start adding to the other side to allow that time to build up with scraps. And then the first side would break down and you could empty that before the other one was finished. It was fancy. It looked lovely. I struggled to get a routine going with it. It was fast. It was fast at breaking down. It was pest resistant, although the bugs, when you opened it, you would get a bit of a wave of bugs coming out of it. It was easy. The kids used to use it. The cons are it was very expensive, and if you didn't get the ratio right, it was not forgiving. If it was too dry, it would dry out really quick. If it was too wet, you would feel like you were just sloshing around an old washing machine. And they're not huge, so they're not good for large volumes. If you've got a large volume of stuff that you're trying to compost, they are not great for that because they're not big enough. They're more for a backyard or a small household. So if you have that and you're prepared to spend that kind of money and you want something nice and neat and pretty looking, then that's the way to go. Option 2 is a compost bin. Now, these are just the plastic tubs that sit on the ground, and you literally lift the lid and put organic matter in the top, and you can kind of layer it. So you can put in green matter and then the next day put in a bit of dry, and just keep kind of layering it like that. By the time it gets close to the top and is full, most of them have a little trapdoor at the bottom that you can open and dig some of that compost out of the bottom. And what's sitting in the bottom, by the time you get to the top being full, what's sitting in the bottom generally is broken down enough for you to put straight onto your garden. Now, these ones are cheaper. Sometimes councils here in Australia will subsidise the bins to try and encourage people to put less organic matter in their bins, their waste bins. And sometimes you can get them really cheap at Bunnings, anywhere between 10, 20, up to 50 for a really big one. But some of them are quite cheap. Realistically, if you wanted to do it and you didn't want to spend that money, get a plastic bin, just a normal plastic bin, and cut the bottom out of it. That's the easiest way. Cut the bottom out of it, dig a little bit of a trench, stick it in the ground maybe an inch, and then use the lid that came with it to cover it so that you haven't got pests getting in and out of it. And then just lift the lid, put your stuff in. When you're finished, you can lift the bin up and all the compost will fall out the bottom. Now, that's a little bit more work than the ones you buy that have got the trapdoor at the bottom, but it's a handy way of doing it. Now, they're good for suburban backyards where you don't want to spend a couple of $100 on a turn-in compost, but you want it to kind of be neat and contained in the back of the yard. Now, I had one of these when I lived in a rental. It was actually there when we moved there, when I was building my house, the last house that I built in Canberra. And it worked really well. The compost that came out the bottom of it was fantastic. I probably grew the best pumpkin and strawberries I've ever grown that year. And that was just in a tiny little backyard garden. It was a rental property. And we had cherry tomatoes and pumpkins growing like crazy. So that was great. So the last one is the cheapest option, and it's what we do here because we are tight asses and we don't like spending money. And it's literally a pile on the ground. Now, what the handy helper did do was he put a couple of sleepers and just got some Rio bar, like some of the big metal steel bars, to hold the timber sleepers so that they make a sort of a wall just on the bottom. So it's only two sleepers, kind of two sleepers high at the bottom. And the pole sits much higher than the sleepers. And we literally put it in there, and then all we do is turn the pole over. And that's all we've done for the last 4 years, and we get fantastic compost out of it. It cost us nothing because the sleepers and the iron bars were on a scrap heap that he found. And he used those to just, like I say, we only did 3 sides, so it's just a back and a side, each side. We dump all of our animal manure, all of our scraps that aren't going to chickens, all of our grass cuttings into the front of that area, and then we just flip it over and let that stuff get buried underneath. Sometimes we don't even flip it over, I've got to be honest. Sometimes we just dump the manure on top and walk away and come back in a couple of weeks and flip it over. But that is super cheap. It doesn't look as good. If you're on an acreage, you will have enough space to do it. It is slow. We've put tarps over it before to heat it up to try and get the breakdown happening a bit quicker. And it does. As soon as you put a tarp over it, it will break it down and like the heat will generate everything breaking down quicker. But we don't always cover it. And it works just fine. Now, once you've got your pile, what do you do now? Things to keep your compost happy. So, air is necessary for compost to do its thing. When organic matter is breaking down, it needs air to break down. It can't be smothered. If it's smothered, it's not going to happen. So the way that you add air to your compost pile is to mix it up with either a shovel or a fork. Now, if you've got a tumbler, you're mixing air by turning it. If you've got one of the compost bins, you can just get a small fork, a forked shovel kind of thing, and stick it in there and just flip it over. But it does need to get some air. And that's the only thing I will say about those bins, having the bins only as a compost option. They don't always break it down as well because they're not getting turned over in the same way. But with an open pile, we just go in there, we get a pitchfork, flick it over, And we probably only do that about once a month, I've got to be honest. And we haven't been gardening over the last 6 months because of me and my leg. But even the years before that, probably maybe every second week we'd go and turned over. Now, if you can't do that, if for some reason you can't, it will still break down. Don't stress. It will still break down. It will just take a little bit longer to do it because it's not getting the air in. So even the laziest of compost piles will get to that point eventually where it breaks down. Moisture. Back to that moist word that everybody hates. The pile should feel, I've got here, like a wrung out sponge. It should be damp. It needs to be damp in order to break down, not dripping wet. Now, if for some reason you put too much brown matter in and it feels dry and this doesn't seem to be as much moisture in it, then what I'd suggest is give it a light sprinkle with a hose. It really does need to have some moisture in it. Or cover it with a tarp, and what will happen is it'll sweat a little, and when it sweats a little, the moisture level will come up. If it's too dry, it just won't break down. If it's too wet, you'll know because it'll go slimy and you'll probably get a bit of an odour about it. Compost shouldn't smell bad. It should smell like breaking down soil. It should smell very earthy. If it smells like rotting anything, then it's too damp. So you need to either add some more brown matter to it or give it a really good turnover and let the air get to it, and that'll help it dry out. So in summer, you might need to give it a little bit of water across the top of it if it's really, really drying out. And in heavy rain, you may need to chuck a tarp over it because you don't want it to be completely soggy and bogged up. Now, that being said, our big pile has been open now for probably 6 months, uncovered, and we haven't had a problem with it being too wet. We've had a fair bit of rain in the last 6 months too, and it still hasn't been too wet. Size. Bigger is better when it comes to compost. I always say size doesn't count. A larger pile of compost will generate more heat, and heat is what helps it break down. So if you want to speed up decomposition and you don't have a big compost pile, whack a tarp over it. Try and cover it in some way that's going to help hold the heat in, because that heat is what makes everything decompose and break down. The heat will also kill any weeds that may come up, because if you have it sitting there, and we have it happen quite often, our compost pile around the edge of it, it'll just start growing because the weeds go, this is really good soil, we'll take this. So covering it will also help prevent the weeds. And the heat, keeping the heat up to the compost pile will stop weeds from growing in it. If you're doing it in an open plan like that, I would say a pile at least 1 metre square. Smaller than that generally won't heat up enough. Now, ours is probably 2 metres by 2 metres, and it does a really good job. But even in a small backyard, 1 metre by 1 metre is not as big as you think. Go and measure it out. It's literally an adult man's leg stride is about 1 metre. So it's not very big, and you can definitely build up, enough of a pile with that. My phone keeps digging next to me and keeps distracting me. Okay, common problems and fixes. We're nearly done. So what are the kinds of things that could go wrong and you would look at and go, oh shit, what have I done with my compost? Why is it not working? Problem number 1, it smells bad. Like I said, it should not smell bad. It should smell earthy. If it smells bad, chances are it's too much green matter in it. So you have to put some more browns in it, more dry carbon matter, so cardboard, straw, dry leaves, or give it a really good turnover, or do all of the above, and it should fix the problem. The other problem is not breaking down enough. So if it doesn't break down enough, like if you're looking and going this, I can still see kitchen scraps when I'm turning it over, chances are it might be a little bit dry. So give it a little bit of water, because water is needed to help that decomposition. And you can add more greens if you want to do that as well, because that's essentially adding more moisture as well. Fresh grass clippings are a really good one for it. If you put fresh grass clippings in and give it a good turn, they will put enough moisture through to generally start breaking it down. You can also chuck a tarp over it. I haven't got it on my notes, but you can chuck a tarp over it and the heat will sometimes help that decomposition start. Pests, rats and mice. They're usually out there looking for cooked food, or food that's left in quite big chunks. So the way that I do it is I always try and cover any new fresh food that I put in there. I try and cover it with some of what's already there, so that the smell is not kind of getting out to the pests, to let them know that there's food scraps there. So if you've put stuff in there and you see mice or rats hanging around, cover it with a tarp, cover the scraps with any soil that's already there, any compost that's already developed, cover them with that. And generally, if you can't see or smell the scraps you've put in, you won't have a problem. Now, if you're in a turner or in one of the tubs, put a lid on it, and that'll stop any kind of pests getting in. What not to stress about. So what I want to finish with is, like I said at the beginning, having it done is better than none. Starting and getting a compost that maybe isn't perfect is still going to be better than not having a compost at all. So don't stress about the ratios being perfect. A rough balance is perfectly fine. Compost is very forgiving, and there's so many ways that you can fix it and get it back on track if it does seem to go wrong. Don't stress about having the fancy system. A pile on the ground has worked well for us for years. A $10 bin works well. You don't need the $300 multi-turn compost turner barrel thing. If you want to get that and you've got the money to spare, have at it, but you don't need it. And don't stress about doing it wrong. There's no wrong. Basically, organic matter is rotting, and that's how we develop compost. And so long as you're putting organic matter in, and so long as you are, continually putting organic matter in and then turning it over, then you're composting. So you don't have to be some amazing gardener to make your compost work. I am a shit gardener. I say it all the time. I am a great animal livestock farmer. I am a terrible gardener, and it's something that I'm still learning after like the last 10 years of growing my own food. I am still learning to do it properly. I have just as many fails as what I have wins. Oh, probably now I probably have more wins than fails. But in the beginning, I definitely have more fails than I did wins. So long as you're doing something, you're better than half the population. It's like that meme, when a larger person is out jogging and, people sometimes make comment. That person is still better than all those lazy shits that are sitting on the lounge, aren't they? If you are composting, you're still better than most people that don't even have a garden. Now, what I want you to do from today is I'm going to give you all a task. I want you to get your compost piles going. I'm going to, through the week, post a couple of pictures of our compost pile, and I think that you should post some pictures of your compost pile and link me into the picture. So whatever social media you're on, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, TikTok, do a video, do whatever, post your compost pile and link me in at Mojo Homestead, and I will go in there and go, yeah, you. And genuinely just chuck some stuff in to a corner of the garden. You don't have to even do sleepers like what we did. Now, if you've been thinking about that, I just wanted to kind of say, don't forget that I do have some things for sale. I don't generally kind of push the stuff that I have online that's for sale, but realistically, I'm probably doing myself a disservice by not talking about it. If you didn't know, I do have a book called Brooded. I can't even remember what it's called. Brooded a Plate, which is all about raising meat birds. If you are at all interested in raising meat birds, it is available on Amazon. So go on there and search for Brooded a Plate, which is part of the Ditch the Store series. My second book is so close to done, and because of my leg, I've just been up in the air with trying to work and get other things sorted. But over the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to have that published, which is Eggs Without Cartons. For those of you that are looking at getting chickens and are beginners and you're not sure where to start, it's a great book to have for that, because we go through right from the very beginning what you need to know. and they will be linked in the show notes if you are interested in those books. I also have a stack of journals that I sell on Amazon as well that are journals for you to keep your egg. I've got eggs, I've got a chicken journal, a goat journal, a beekeeping journal, and a general farm journal if there's things that you need to write down. Because I don't like writing on tablets. I'm on my iPad. I tend to prefer to write with pen and paper. I know that makes me sound like a boomer, but I'm Gen X, I swear. Anyway, next week we are talking about my favourite winter growings, which is potatoes, garlics and onions. I'll go through what I do, how I do it, and what you can do to get yours growing, because it's not too late to get them in the ground. So we'll talk about that next week. Anyway, I will see you all next week and have a lovely week. Bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojahomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.